No credits roll at the beginning, no soothing background harmony, just the hum of humming fluorescent lights and the metallic beat of heels on the courtroom floor. Christine arrived, the same woman whom everyone thought they already knew, with that blue binder held in her hand. But it was different this time. It was thicker, heavier, marked by stamps and tabs of color code and law. This binder was no longer a symbol. It was a weapon, with something the world had not yet seen. Evidence. On the opposite side of the room, Cody remained tense at the defense table, jaw tightly clenched and fists balled together. His attorney, more crisis manager than advocate, already wore a worried look. Robin sat one row back, as if even she did not wish to be on the front lines of what awaited. The courtroom felt smaller today, not because of the walls, but because power had switched hands. Everyone felt it. Even the air was more taut. The judge glanced up from his bench, his voice firm but incisive. "We are here to conclude arguments regarding custodial rights and property division between Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brown." He paused. "Mrs. Brown, do you have any other documents to present?" Christine rose instantly. "Yes, Your Honor." Her tone was firm, almost startlingly steady. She held the binder close, like a sword she'd been waiting years to unsheath, and handed it to the clerk. "Everything we've discussed is in here, and more, including evidence of financial concealment, coercive control, and a 2014 custody contract Mr. Brown asked me to sign, and then acted like it never existed." The room shifted. What had been a subdued ending suddenly snapped apart into pandemonium. Cody's face flushed. "She's making this up," he snarled. Christine leaned slightly toward him, her eyes steady but unblinking. "You had me sign it in front of our counselor. I was scared, and you knew it, but I copied it. You had no idea I scanned it and emailed it to my sister just in case." The entire courtroom stood in stunned silence. Even Robin gasped sharply. The judge cleared his throat. "We'll take a brief recess while I go through this binder," he said to them, voice trembling ever so slightly under the weight of what had just dropped. When recess began, Christine remained still, calm, collected, unmoving. The judge shuffled papers, the soft slice of paper through the air. Cody walked restlessly, his lawyer leaning in to whisper, "You never mentioned anything to me about this custody form?" Cody was silent. He just stared straight ahead, at nothing. When court reconvened, the judge's expression was serious. "Mrs. Brown," he began carefully, "you're stating that this 2014 document was signed in private in your counselor's office?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said firmly. "He told me it would make parenting easier. Then he buried it for 9 years. The judge turned the page. "This letter grants Mrs. Brown sole legal custody in the event of a separation. Mr. Brown would have had to petition for joint custody by filing for guardianship, and he didn't." Christine nodded. "Correct, Your Honor, and it's signed, dated and notarized via email from our therapist." Cody's voice trembled as he finally broke his silence. "That was not ever meant to be binding. It was emotional, not legal." The judge pushed forward. "Your signature is right on here, Mr. Brown. Are you accusing forgery?" "No," Cody splurted. "Then it's admissible," the judge decided bluntly. Christine didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She didn't have to. The paper spoke for her, louder than any words could. Robin glared at Cody, whispering, "Why didn't you inform me of that?" He said nothing, but Christine wasn't done yet. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "that's not the only document that matters." The judge looked up. "Go on." She took a deep breath. Cody transferred the Flagstaff property deed into an LLC in Robin's birth name in 2021. He claimed it was for tax purposes, but that deed removed the names of all other wives from it. Mine was one. The judge's eyebrows flew up. "And that was after the breakup?" "Yes," answered Christine. "After I departed, and right after he closed our joint account." The judge clicked his pen, the ring of it like the sound of a gavel. Mr. Brown, this would appear to be concealing assets. Cody's voice broke the silence. It was an odd time. We were splitting up. Christine met his eye. You weren't protecting the family, Cody. You were protecting yourself. And then she dug into her bag. Your Honor, there's one thing more. She produced a flash drive and gave it to the clerk. This is a tape, she explained, her voice steady but cutting as glass. A telephone conversation between Cody and me, the evening before the transfer. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. The air itself seemed to catch its breath. The judge nodded slowly. We will hear the tape after lunch recess. Christine leaned back, expression blank. She'd come to break him, not demolish him. She'd come to speak the truth, at last, in totality, and for the record. Because sometimes the loudest thing in a courtroom isn't the gavel, it's the stillness after the truth. The courtroom was chilly, not quiet, chilly. The kind of quiet that appears to be pressing down on your breastbone. Christine's flash drive had just been played, but before it could play even a second, she breathed softly. Your Honor, this call is about how I learned that my access was cancelled. The judge gestured to the technician. Play it. The room was filled with the soft hum of a speakerphone and Christine's voice, even but fraying at the edges. Hello, I'm calling because I'm not able to get into our shared account. And then the advisor's reply, Hello, Christine. Since January 3rd, your account has been suspended. I can't say anything more unless both account holders are present. The sound hit like a gavel. Christine's breathing was audible on tape, stilled, hushed, resigned. Cody glared at the floor, not the judge. The tape stopped. Mr. Brown, the judge drawled, did you authorize this change? Cody didn't blink. The question was asked again, with a harder bite. Did you revoke your wife's financial powers during her time as a lawful trustee? Cody finally stood up. Yes, he acknowledged, his voice little more than a whisper. But there was a motive. The judge moved forward. And what was it? She left, Cody snarled. The judge's tone hardened. She was your legal wife then. This court now has reason to revisit monetary impropriety. The language cut deeper than any ruling. Christine didn't move on her shoulders. She remained still. Her stillness spoke. Years of quietude, of domination, of erasure piece by piece. All of it hung suspended in the room. What everyone learned then was unbelievable. This was not a mother fighting for custody or a wife fighting for fairness. This was a woman showing the manner in which she'd been erased, not heard, but removed, dollar by dollar, account by account, while the world called it love. The judge took a deep breath. Let's get on with it, he said quietly. He turned the binder to the next page, custody preparation, school reports, doctor's appointments, travel permits, all Christine's signatures. He stared straight at Cody. Mr. Brown, how many nights did you live with your minor children during the 18 months preceding this filing? Cody hesitated, looking at his lawyer. I had visitations, but I was juggling other family obligations. Do you have proof of that? No, Cody whispered. Christine got up once more, her voice firm but quivering. Your Honor, I do. She held up a calendar, neat print and scribbled on. He hasn't attended a single doctor's appointment or school meeting since March of 2020. She then pulled out of her binder a screenshot, a group text. Her message on it said that Truly, their daughter, had a 104-degree fever. His message trail beneath it, unread, unopened. The judge looked down. The silence screamed. Robin placed her hand over her mouth, and although Janelle and Mary were not present in the room, their absence screamed more than their ever-presence could. Okay, the judge said slowly. So you're saying Mr. Brown wasn't present in day-to-day parenting for nearly 2 years? Christine nodded. Unless you count calls that were not answered, Your Honor. And for the first time, Cody's voice cracked. I was overwhelmed, he whispered. I didn't know how to be a father from afar. The judge's retort was eye steel. "Mr. Brown, that's no excuse. That's the way joint custody is. You don't get to opt out on it." And then, Christine did something nobody could have predicted. She walked quietly over to the center of the courtroom and unfolded a small, handwritten piece of paper. "This," she said, "was written by my daughter the night she overheard Cody and Robin talking about this." She handed it to the clerk. The judge read aloud, "If she is gone, we exclude her. No longer assistance, no longer coverage, no longer sharing. She made this choice, so let her pay for it." The words hung like smoke in the air. The judge looked expectant, eyes wide. "Who authored this?" Christine was silent. She didn't need to be. The truth clung to the silence. Cody's face contorted, his jaw shaking to hold in place the very last pieces of the image he'd built. The courtroom no longer saw a guardian father or a wrongly accused husband. They saw a man defending an image, one already shattered. But Christine wasn't finished. "Your Honor," she went on, rummaging once more in her binder, "this document is what changed everything." It was a paper email in a plastic pocket and dated April 14th, 2021. "It was CC'd to Cody's financial advisor," Christine said. "I was accidentally CC'd because I was still on one of the LLCs." The judge adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. "By our previous meeting, Christine's filing should precede the reorganization of Coyote Pass assets. Robin remains the most credit and access-worthy beneficiary. Exclude Christine and Janelle as instructed." The entire courtroom was stunned. Cody leaned in, his voice shaking. "That wasn't final. That was just a draft." The judge looked up. "Is your name on the list as the individual who issued those instructions?" Cody swallowed. "Yes, but it was strategy." Christine fixed her eyes on his, not moving. "You lied to me. You told me you were doing it for the kids. You were sending it all to Robin behind our backs." Robin didn't move, her eyes fixed on some point in front of her. The judge flipped the page. "There's a notation here at the bottom. Make sure Christine's post-separation documents are cleaned digitally prior to transfer." Cody's mouth opened, but he did not speak. "Explain that to me," the judge insisted. Cody shook his head weakly. "I didn't do it. It was the planner." "And yet," Christine interrupted gently, "you never attempted to stop him." That was when the opinion in the courtroom changed entirely. They no longer saw a man who simply came up short. They saw intent, strategy, calculation. The judge scribbled something on his pad. "This is consistent with the withdrawn account access, the hidden property transfers, and the abandoning of the custody responsibilities," he added. "This is no longer a separation matter. It's one of erasure, by design." Cody's attorney jumped up. "Your Honor, I object to that characterization." The judge didn't look up. "Your client used corporate structures to conceal marital assets and to psychologically manipulate his wife. You may sit down." Christine did not smile. She simply stood up a little taller. And for the first time, it was clear to all. The courtroom wasn't watching a divorce. They were witnessing the silent disintegration of control. Because sometimes justice does not come crashing down. Sometimes it walks in quietly, with binder in hand, and will not move until the truth is told. Christine stood taller now, no longer the shaking woman the world had sympathized with once. She reached deep into her binder one last time and pulled out a folded letter. "And here," she said quietly but with tone iron hard as steel, "is the 2015 letter Cody wrote to me, the letter he didn't recall I still had." She handed it over to the clerk. "In this letter, he promised the Flagstaff house would be in my name in 3 years. That promise was never kept." The judge read the document softly, then raised his head and nodded. "This court," he said cautiously, "now has reason to grant full custodial rights to Mrs. Brown and proceed with a forensic investigation of asset transfers." It wasn't loud. It wasn't filmic. But the weight of those words changed everything. That single declaration didn't just strip away Cody's reputation. It began dismantling the very empire that he once held. The courtroom no longer filled with the smell of wood and paper. It filled with the odor of crumbling power. Cody slumped too in a seat, not in defiance anymore, but in defeat. The posture of a man who finally realized that control had never been fate. It had only ever been lent. Christine didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply sat, the way a person sits after a long storm when thunder has stopped, but the air is still charged with memory. She hadn't come to win. She came to make the truth unconscionable. The judge flipped the binder again, landing on the page that said Custodial Clauses, Supplemental. In it were two principals' signed letters confirming that Christine had been the sole emergency contact for her children for 4 years. Medical and therapy forms contained only her name. The judge spoke to Cody. "Mr. Brown," he inquired levelly, "why isn't your name on any of the parenting records from 2019? Cody swallowed hard. "I was occupied with the younger children," he said, "and the pandemic made it difficult to get about. Christine, she wasn't particularly welcoming to me to enter." Christine glared at him, her voice cutting the air with glass-like sharpness. "I welcomed you, Cody. You just never showed up." She brandished a printed screenshot. "This is Truly's message to you." The courtroom listened closely as she read, "Mom, are you going to parent night?" No response. "I want you to come even if it makes you uncomfortable." No response. Christine's hand quivered a little. "That's our daughter, Your Honor. She wept when he didn't respond." The judge's eyes closed for a moment before he spoke. "It is apparent that this court cannot award custody to a parent who has so completely abdicated their role." Cody's lips parted, but nothing occurred. No camera to act for, no practiced alibi, only the bitter truth of quiet and loss. Then Christine returned to her binder, again. She produced a yellow envelope. "This was anonymous 2 weeks ago," she told him. "I had it verified." The judge opened the one sheet of paper inside, a private property transfer named F.A. Robin Brown LLC. At the bottom, Cody Brown's signature, the date, February 4th, 2023, well after the breakup, well after the depositions had begun. The judge's voice grew stern immediately. "Mr. Brown, were you still conveying marital property while this court's temporary freeze of assets was in place?" Cody blinked. "I didn't know it was in effect on LLC transfers." "It was," the judge responded brusquely, "and that puts you in the category of a violator of a court order." The air was charged. Then came the words that ratified it all. "Effective immediately," the judge declared. "Cody Brown is stripped of any decision-making power on joint marital property. Sole custody goes to Christine Brown. All assets identified will be seized pending investigation." There was no reaction. Robin covered her mouth with her hand. Christine eased her binder closed with a whisper-soft thud. Not a victory movement, but a release. And Cody? He simply sat there, stunned. His shoulders crumpled inward as if the weight of truth itself was there. He looked less like a husband and more like a man who discovers his throne never was. There was no swing of a gavel, only silence that hung so thick it seemed to vibrate. The judge's words cut into the silence. "A written order will be generated in 24 hours. Mrs. Brown is now sole legal guardian of her minor children. All contested assets are frozen for forensic audit." And then he turned to Cody, eyes unyielding. "You are no longer in control of any joint family asset. None." That single sentence didn't close a case. It closed a book on an empire built on illusion. Cody's lawyer leaned forward and breathed into his ear. "We can petition for reconsideration." Cody didn't flinch. He wasn't listening to the law anymore. He was still trying to wrap his head around how the power he was sure was absolute had dissipated in a second. The courtroom was never going to be about him. It wasn't even now. The judge glanced in Christine's direction. "Is there anything else for the record?" Christine rose slowly and reached for one final item. It wasn't a document. It wasn't a piece of evidence. It was a photograph. Her daughter sitting barefoot on a porch, laughing, eating watermelon. "Just this," she said softly. "This is what I've been protecting. Not property, not revenge, just them, their future." The judge nodded gently. Noted. And so, the man who had once found himself at the center of a national spotlight disappeared. The patriarch, the decision-maker, the face of a family dynasty, gone. Robin talked softly. "So, what now?" Christine looked at her, not in hatred, but in understanding. "Now," she said, "you understand what it is like to be left outside the plan?" Because the truth, as things turned out, was never in Christine's binder. It was in all the locations Cody's name was not. And now, so was the court. The judge stood up, announcing the recess for post-verdict consideration. Christine lifted her binder, not like a weapon, but like a shield she no longer needed to carry. Cody did not budge. For the first time in his public career, he was at a loss. Reporters sat and wrote in silence. The mood in the room had changed, not just against Cody Brown, but against the myth that he'd created. For years, he'd been the builder of a television kingdom. But today, in a courthouse filled with fluorescent light and paper documents, that kingdom fell quietly, fact by fact, tab by tab. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that whisper is louder than any empire ever built. It wasn't the courtroom that had gotten out of hand that day. It was Cody. And the woman exiting, she wasn't merely exiting with a verdict. She was exiting with her own tale, finally in her own control. Christine strode down the courthouse corridor with implied fortitude. Her lawyer by her side, binder hugged to her chest. The area behind her stayed motionless, almost reverent. Photographers did not blast, microphones did not pop. Even the courthouse staff looked down. It was as if the walls themselves understood the gravity of what had just happened. In the courtroom, Robin sat, slumped shoulders, unfocused eyes. "Cody," she panted, trembling, "you swore we were safe." There was no answer. Cody's mouth twisted, but no sound emerged. The man who had once defined dominance as divine power sat hollow now, staring at the wreckage of his own reign. Robin stood before the clerk, her voice splintering. "There's nothing we can do, is there?" The clerk remained silent, because there wasn't. The decision had been made. The court hadn't just removed Cody's custody or his money. It had removed from him something far greater, the illusion of power without penalty. Robin cried, not with love, not with loyalty, but with the illusion that had disintegrated around her. She believed she was the exception, but there was no throne to share. Outside, Christine did not weep. She walked toward her car with dignified silence. Her lawyer handed her a folder, the official verdict. "Congratulations," he whispered. Christine looked at the paper, then out the open Arizona sky. "It's not a victory," she said. "It's a restoration." At the same time, in chambers, Cody was rock hard, surrounded by emptiness where his dominion used to be. The judge's assistant approached him, depositing a sealed envelope in his palm. A notice for him to appear in an independent deposition for contempt of the asset freeze order. He didn't even lift the seal. Because inside, Cody knew, Christine hadn't abandoned him. She'd abandoned the version of him who'd ever believed this day would come. The man once brash about ruling 4 wives by divine right now sat alone, unable to rule even his own memory. Christine placed her binder gently on the passenger seat, as if it finally earned rest. This was never about vengeance. It was about taking back her voice, her value, and her right to be heard in a world that had demanded she remain silent. For years, she hadn't felt like one of 4. She felt whole. By morning, it had reached everywhere. Social media and the news networks were clogged with headlines. Christine Brown wins full custody and property rights. Court freezes Cody's assets. But the biggest bombshell hadn't been made public yet. That came hours later when Christine's attorneys made one more motion to cut off Cody's ownership rights to Coyote Pass. That property had been his own symbol of power, his dream of a family complex, a kingdom, a concrete reminder of his self-made patriarchal dynasty. But when Christine left, that fantasy disappeared, and the court now possessed the deeds to back up the fact it was never actually shared in the first place. The judge reviewed the deeds in chambers. "So," he said slowly, turning a page, "Mr. Brown conveyed partial ownership to an LLC after a breakup and didn't disclose it." Christine's lawyer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. He omitted it from the divorce filing." The judge wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His silence braided disappointment with heavier threads than anger. Later in the day, the ruling was made. Coyote Pass would be divided 50-50, half to Christine, the other half placed in court-controlled escrow. Cody no longer had a right to develop, sell, or construct without Christine's written permission. When Robin learned the news, she wept in the parking lot. She'd left her family in Arizona, believing the land was theirs for life, only to learn it was never actually promised. It was all a lie. Cody made a short, hollow statement to the press. "I'm disappointed. I wanted unity. The world misunderstood. The world hadn't misunderstood. The world had finally got it. This wasn't unity. It was unbridled power, finally confronted and dismantled." Christine did not hold a press conference. She didn't need to. She drowned out his soundbites for good. She still filed one handwritten statement in court for the public record. It read, "May Coyote Pass finally be a place of peace for my children. That is all I ever wanted." The same soil Cody had once called our legacy now lay as evidence of how far they'd strayed. Christine's share came with full legal title, the right to build, to sell, to create something that was entirely hers. Not borrowed, not promised, not held in someone else's name. She wasn't leaving something behind for the first time. She was moving toward herself. She wasn't just the woman who left, she was the woman who stood up. And the court finally agreed. She shouldn't have had to fight for that privilege in the first place. Days later, one last document surfaced, a forensic audit report, a spreadsheet called Unaccounted Funds, F.A. Brown Family Trust. It wasn't flashy, it didn't need to be, but it was devastating. At the top, a $147,000 payment 6 months prior to trial. The target, RB Holdings LLC, Robin's initials, Robin's digital signature, Robin's account. Money meant for shared family bills had been quietly diverted into a sole proprietorship firm, one that Christine, Janelle, and Mary weren't even aware of. The judge read it, expression stony, before issuing his ultimate decree. This court believes sufficient cause to investigate marital trust money abuse. A special master will be appointed to review all accounts associated with RB Holdings and any LLCs formed after 2020. Cody tried to protest, stuttering. "That account was temporary, Christine interrupted her, silky and lethal. "You didn't have to, Cody. You wanted to. You just never thought I'd be smart enough to locate the receipts." Robin fell apart trying to defend herself. "That money was to construct a home for my kids," she yelled. The judge's reaction was absolute, his voice contained but firm. "What you were seeking to build," he declared, "wasn't a home. It was a sanctuary of control, upheld by manipulation. That is not sacred stewardship. That is economic malpractice." And like that, the empire once defined by religion was brought down by fact. Paperwork, not prophecy. Receipts, not revelations. Christine did not smile as she left court that day. She just breathed, a breath trapped inside her for more than 10 years. Because this was not about power, it was about peace. And finally, she had both. The room chilled in the courtroom. Cody instinctively held out his hand for Robin's, But she moved away, and with one simple action, it was finished. Even Robin understood finally. This was not going to be resolved with tears. Christine didn't flinch. She didn't grin or smirk. She simply reached into her purse and pulled out one final envelope. "These," she spoke calmly, "are instructions from the family accountant requesting verification of the RB Holdings account. I never received them. Janelle didn't either. Only Robin and Cody replied. She planted the papers on the clerk's desk. No theatrics, no anger, just evidence, simple, deliberate, irrefutable. Robin's name was no longer tied to emotion or favoritism. It was now tied to a paper trail. A paper trail that no one in that court could stand behind. The judge accepted the documents and instructed them to be entered into the record. A civil financial audit was specifically instructed to be done the next quarter. Christine did not smile. She did not even breathe. She leaned into her lawyer and whispered, "That's the last one, the final receipt I needed." Cody sat immobile, realization spreading over his face like a shadow. Christine hadn't just walked out on him. She'd maneuvered out, and not out of spite. She'd done it out of need, out of self-preservation, out of the silent exhaustion that unfolds one document at a time. When the court clerk stamped the RB Holdings ledger into evidence, everyone in the room knew this was no longer a matter of whether Cody would lose control. The only question now was how much more would disintegrate before the dust settled. For a decade, Christine had written it all down, every receipt, every discrepancy, every silent betrayal. Not to ruin Cody, but she knew in her heart this day would come. A day that she'd have to show him the pain he wouldn't or couldn't feel. And that day had finally arrived. The court ordered a forensic audit, a complete review of the Brown family real estate deals, LLC revenues, and trust withdrawals from 2017 on. The upcoming report, expected in a few months, could lead to civil penalties. And if the report supported abuse of family trust funds, both Cody and Robin could face charges of financial misconduct. But Christine didn't seek revenge. When her lawyer leaned forward and asked whether she wanted to have it pursued further, she simply said, "The court gave me what I needed. Now I just want peace." She didn't require revenge. She'd reclaimed her narrative, told for years that she was too much, too emotional, too outspoken, too difficult to manage. But today, she'd made something undeniable. She was enough. Always had been. That evening, Christine crossed the front lawn of the house now officially hers. The sun filtered through the trees in a manner it never had. Not due to the sky having changed, but because she had. No more getting permission, no more sitting around waiting for a thumbs up. Just her, her children, and the life she built from the ashes of a shared dream. Christine never needed a courtroom to acknowledge her existence, but that it did, openly, legally, irrevocably, that was justice. Not of the sort hammered out of revenge, but of the sort hammered out of finally being heard. And for the first time in years, Cody Brown had no say, no veto, no control. Because the story, finally, no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her.